Welcome everyone. I am Marianne Cosgrove, Acting Chair of Humanists Australia. Before we begin this session, I wish to acknowledge that I live and work on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land and that sovereignty was never ceded. I wish to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today. I recognise your continuing connection to culture and country. I will listen to your stories and try to understand your lived experiences. I will speak up when I see you suffering from injustice. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be made available to the public through the Humanists Australia YouTube channel and other media. Please keep your video camera off if you're concerned for your privacy. And in fact, please keep your cameras off except for the panelists or when you're asking a question. So we can give the panelists some prominence. This session is part of Humanists Australia's Launch-a-Palooza, a series of events celebrating the launch of Australia's newest humanist organisation. Today is all about community, and in this afternoon session, we talk to some leaders from various Australian humanist communities. I will be representing the Canberra humanist community. Stella is from Adelaide. Alison is from Brisbane. Les is, his community is the Ex-Religious Support Network. Jeff is a leader of the Rainbow Atheists. And Alistair is representing Humanist Youth. So we have a couple of kickoff questions to get the panelists started in a conversation, and then we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. So I'll start off with, why are humanist communities important? If any one of the panelists would like to speak to that. Les?
I can say a couple of words. People, the way they're built, want to feel part of a community. It gives them this, well-being studies have shown this for years. If you're knitted into your local community or some kind of community, it enhances your well-being. So it's a part of being human.
Would anyone else like to speak to that?
I agree. Connection is so important, and the humanist values are so, they're a wide spread of values that can bring a lot of people together to work on those values and advertise them as a worthy community to be part of.
I should have mentioned earlier, if you do have a question to ask, you can either put your hand up through the participants panel. There's a button there where you can put your hand up, or just wave at me through your screen if your video is on, or type in the chat. I will acknowledge people as I see them in the chat or verbally. Jeff, I saw your hand go up.
Yes, I'd just like to add, I agree with what the others have said about community, and I also think it comes to a sense of belonging. I think certainly with LGBT communities, there's been a lot of alienation in past years, and I'm even finding that in some atheist circles now, where they're making similar comments about needing to come out as an atheist. And I think LGBT atheists have some difficulty. They're generally overlooked in many of the LGBT communities. And I think something like a humanist community gives them not only a sense of validation that their views on religion or lack of religion are as valid as anybody else's, but it also gives them positive values. I think humanism is very much a positive outlook, and it's not just, oh, I think this because I do, but it actually compels us to act, to feel responsibility, and to feel that community for each other.
Alistair?
Yeah, and then I'd love to hear from Clive. I think it'd be incredibly interesting. I think the only thing I'd add to the idea of communities is a necessary, I suppose, part to running an effective organisation, is that as different communities will cater for different groups, and those groups necessarily will have different experiences and therefore require different things. And so having partitioned groups allows, I think, a targeting and a personalisation to the way you run your organisation, the way you engage in really serious issues that are really important. Some people might not want to spend time on issues that are really critical to young people or LGBTQA+ people or whatever. And yet for some subset, those issues are absolutely critical. And, you know, I know Jim Crosthwaite and I have had this challenge as well, is that there's this one area that's really critical and I think logically flows on from a humanist mindset, which is caring about climate change and the environment. And so creating resources that are targeted just to people that happen to prioritize that is a way really to expand humanists more generally, because there are lots of people that are humanists by virtue of being climate advocates. And so allowing them to engage in that issue specifically is actually perversely a way to open them up into other sort of humanist ways of thinking. So that's why I think communities can focus in and also be divergent at the same time. And that's why they're so useful.
Yeah. Clive, I saw your hand.
Yes, I'd just like to say that I agree with all of that. I remember years ago, somebody started up, I think it was an atheist church in the United States. And it was all about getting sense of community amongst like-minded people. I don't know if that would work in Australia. It certainly wouldn't work in a rural setting where I am. It's a bit conservative up here. I think that would be too much for them. But I think this is where Zoom is a marvelous platform, because it enables people such as myself to connect with other humanists, even though that would be almost impossible in Wagga Wagga. Although I'm sure there are plenty of humanists here, and as somebody said, many of them don't realise it. There is a university here, and I'm wondering if somebody could maybe make a connection in the Sturt University. I think there are plenty of young people who want to connect with this sort of organisation. And I know there's a group of skeptics in the Sturt University, and skeptics are probably, because they're thinking skeptically, quite possibly really humanists as well. Anyway, just a couple of thoughts on that.
Yes, I'd really like to get in touch with some of the skeptics and atheists and rationalists groups and see if there are some intersection of members with those. Well, we are collaborating with some of those groups on a project towards the census, the 2021 census, towards making people aware that when the census asks for religion, it's asking, what do you believe in, not what were you born as? Yeah. That sort of thing. I saw Rod's hand go up. Oh, but before Rod, Emma made a comment that there is Sunday Assembly in Melbourne, which is like that atheist church that you mentioned, Clive. And we had a Sunday Assembly here in Canberra as well. And quite a number of those people were the key people who kicked off the reboot of the ACT Humanist Society, and are still members of our Canberra community here. And Emma says there was one in Sydney too. There's a meetup group that meets socially. Yeah, we need to get in touch with those people and see if they're interested in humanist values. So Rod's hand is up, and I see Alistair after Rod.
Yeah, I was continuing on with the same discussion, Marianne, and you might have wanted to mention later, but I'll say it now, that we're talking to an atheist church group, if you want to call them that, called Oasis Network in the US. It is very similar to Sunday Assembly, except that it meets every week rather than monthly, and it's been extremely successful. So I'm hoping that we can collaborate. And I'd say to Clive, I would love to have a go at getting one started in Wagga Wagga. I think we could be quite surprised at how many people might turn up if we sold it the right way, particularly if we get those uni students involved. Yes.
Clive, I see your hand go up, but
yes,
Alan,
if I could just reply to Rod. I also belong to an organisation called U3A, and for a couple of years I ran a skeptics course, and I was quite surprised at the number of people who are interested in just being skeptical. And I think those people would be a natural for, even though they probably may not have heard the word humanist. Yeah.
Alistair?
They're there. Yeah.
Well, I suppose two interesting thoughts. The first is on Sunday Assembly, which is a wonderful organisation that, and for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what they are exactly, they run a kind of, and stop me if I'm wrong about this, guys, but it's often in a church, and it uses kind of the format of a traditional church event, but it's secular, and so rather than reading some gospel, we'll read some poetry, some Rudyard Kipling instead, and you still sing songs, but perhaps they're not hymns, and so you can get the sort of critical element to what is organised religion, or at least it's purported to be the critical value proposition, I suppose, and that is you get a sense of community, deep connection with other people, and the claim that Sunday Assembly makes is that actually you don't need religiosity to have that deep, meaningful, profound connection, and that you can get it other ways. The flip side of that, I think, is that some people are, and I'd love Les to speak on this, perhaps traumatized by the structure of what their religious experience had. And so mimicking that structure in a secular way might not cater to everyone. It might feel too similar, too close to home to what they once experienced and that they're trying to get away from. So I think that's one thing that I think is a really interesting question. And the second one that Clive's sort of alluding to is, that's why we need a regional community. We need someone in the Australian humanist movement whose speciality is creating resources and events, particularly for people in regional areas where they can't physically get to other people. That, I think, what makes the idea of the community structure so strong is, yes, we have a governing structure for the humanists in Australia now that can be really proactive on an individual basis, whereas before it was more generalised. But now we've got to use that to make sure that we cater for everyone, including people in regional areas. So I think that's the idea that jumps out to me is, regional has been transformed by Zoom, but there's more to go. We've got to keep the momentum going to make sure that the organisation is ready for the future for more people all around Australia and the world.
Les, do you have any comment on the thought that people might have been traumatised by church and want something different?
I can speak for 5 minutes about that, but I'll just keep it very short. In terms of structure, it's the patriarchal structure that is one aspect of why people leave their sect or their religion. So a young woman or a girl who's been sexually abused, she, if you're a Jehovah's Witness or Seventh-day Adventist, you appear in front of the group of elders, which is old white men like me, and you are made to tell your story of abuse. You're abused by so-and-so in the church. You are made to tell your story in front of this all-male group, all old male group, and be grilled on it. And of course, there are no witnesses. So that's probably the most glaring aspect of the structure, this patriarchal structure. And then there's many other aspects of living in a sect or a religion that cause psychological, sexual and physical abuse. But maybe I can say a little bit more about that later.
There's one thing I'm really keen to get from our panelists today, which is a sense of how Humanists Australia can help your community come together. What kind of support can we give to help grow the community in your area or the community with your interest? Stella?
I don't know. I feel things are very quiet in SA. I'm in Adelaide. And we did have a little bit of an active community a few years ago, but it seems to have dropped off. And I've done a little bit of promotion, I've got a little bit of response, but I think people are just so busy with other things. I think a lot of people align themselves with the values and the ideals, but they don't really have time to interact, and they don't really see big problems needing attention, although they are there, I believe. But in answer to what to do to promote it, I think you are doing it. Having a joint website so that we don't all have to, because that takes time to manage and set up. You know, duplicating that across the country is sort of wasted, I think. It's a great idea what's happening. I think it's baby steps, set it up, and, you know, we've got somewhere to go to now and just keep it there.
On the website, we are offering a page through a platform called Notion, which will give communities an easy web presence. I have to thank Alistair for this suggestion to use Notion. It's a fantastic platform.
Awesome.
And it does give community leaders the opportunity to manage their own web page in a very easy way. In fact, I've got a session with Jeff for Tuesday, I think, was it, Jeff? We're gonna work together.
Tuesday morning.
Yep. I'll be helping Jeff learn how to edit his Rainbow Atheists webpage. Alison, the humanist community in Queensland has also been fairly quiet. Can you think of ways in which Humanists Australia could help you to grow and to support your community?
Look, it has been quiet. There are, you know, some rumours going around that Humanist Society of Queensland doesn't exist anymore. I can debunk those. I'm a member. I'm a regular meeting attender. We haven't met in person since lockdown, and we had our AGM in August, and we're hoping to have another online meeting in January. So we're there, we still exist. There is an issue with communications. We haven't got someone that's maintaining the website, and there's a lot of people a bit grumpy about, you know, that sort of stuff that need to be sorted out. And at tonight's dinner that I'm hosting, there are a few members of Humanist Queensland coming along. So I hope to, you know, to talk to them about, we just need to get on top of those administrative issues. But we're still there. And I certainly think that Humanists Australia is offering a beautiful platform. You've done a wonderful job, particularly you, Marianne, and your committee, in setting it all up the way you have. And I think that that's inspiration. And I've certainly inspired by that, and hope to bring Humanist Society of Queensland, of which I'm not an executive member, never have been, just an ordinary member, to say, come on, let's, you know, pick up our act a bit, and, you know, also raising with them about, you know, becoming one of the associated affiliates with Humanist Australia. So I think in answer to your question, what you've done in setting up Humanist Australia is a boost to our individual society and our members. And, you know, I've been stressing to people that sign up to Humanist Australia. It actually is free, but donations are most welcome. I'm impressed with it, and it's great for inspiration for, you know, for Queensland, and I hope that it's the push that we need to just pick up our act a bit in terms of administrative stuff.
Thank you so much, Alison. It's lovely to hear that. I also received a phone call from Zelda Bailey. Now, I met Zelda at the conference organised by the Council of Australian Humanist Societies last year. And just after that conference, Humanist Queensland withdrew from the council. And I was catapulted into the role of president of the council. not entirely against my will, but it was not intended. And I was concerned about the withdrawal of Humanists Queensland, and I tried to speak to Ron Williams, the president. I had a couple of phone conversations with him, but I never really got to the core of what it would take to provide value to Humanists Queensland, to make them want to come back to the council. But speaking to other people, I realised that the council was not really fit for purpose. And that's why I started up Humanists Australia. And I was so pleased to receive a couple of phone calls since from Zelda, saying that she's really pleased with the way that we're going, and she's thoroughly on board. So it's good to see that happening.
Zelda's coming to the dinner tonight.
Yes, she mentioned that. Yeah,
and I'm in close contact with her. So yeah, she's great. She's a treasure, actually.
Good to hear. Do any other panelists want to talk about how Humanists Australia can help your community grow and help support you? Les?
Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, look, I think the big help for the Ex-Religious Support Network is that we started off as a Melbourne-based community, and we were meeting physically, typically in a library once a month. So it was very much geographically based. And then, of course, Zoom came along, which broadened our membership. But now coming under the umbrella of Humanists Australia as a Humanists Australia community, I'm starting to think more of it now as an Australia-wide ex-religious support network, especially now with the help from Zoom, and the extra marketing you can do through the Humanists Australia channels. You've set up the page on the website, and putting it up on the Humanists Australia Facebook page and the meetup page is a big help to get the message out there to a broader, more national audience. And I think that's a huge help.
There's certainly people who have been traumatized by their religions all over the country who could really use that support.
Absolutely. And that help can come, it's always great to meet face to face, but what I'm finding is even through the Zoom sessions, just being able to see somebody else's face and talk voice to voice is a good part of that, making that connection, that human connection, even though you can't meet physically in the same room.
Alistair, do you have a sense for how we can get more young folk involved in the youth interest group?
That is the sort of eternal question, because if an organisation doesn't bring on new, particularly younger people, then over time an organisation's membership ages, and unfortunately there's only one life, and it is brief, and so as time goes on, members shrink, which is probably not good news for an organisation that wants to do the opposite. So the short answer is that there are hundreds of thousands of humanists in Australia under the age of 30. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that almost all of them don't know they're humanists. They think they care about social issues. They would probably vote in a kind of more progressive way, particularly on social policies, because that's what they spend their time caring about. They care about the planet. They care about intersectionality, about Black Lives Matter, about Indigenous rights. These are very humanist positions, and therefore I think it's reaching into those communities that are very well established and at this stage exceedingly well run, and saying, no, listen, the way you think about the world has a name, and it's broad and it's cohesive and it makes sense, and it actually answers existential questions that you might have been answering, you might have been avoiding to focus on the issue that you know there's an organization for, you know there's an answer to. I care about being a kind, good person, therefore I'll tackle racism. Right, but what is that kindness and goodness that you feel in yourself? What is it? And the existential question is it what makes meaning in my life? The humanist's answer is, yeah, it is. But it might not be the exact same as the person next to you. And that's okay. That's part of the fun of it. And let's begin. And so I think that that message that there's a much more expansive way of seeing things is what young people need to hear. And I think we need outreach that's different to what we've done before, because we have saturated those marketing channels and those ways of meeting people, and all the people that can be reached mostly have been reached. And any extra effort we put into the channels we've already come up with, we'll only get marginal returns on. We'll only get a few people for the many hundreds of people we could if we tried a new approach. And so I think, next time there's a climate march, we should have a stall, let me put it that way. That kind of thing. In fact, I'm always confused why there aren't lots of carbon neutral energy providers at those events saying, no, join PowerShop, we're carbon neutral, please, please, please. That seems like an absolute gimme. But I think we need to do the same. We need to work out where the people are and meet them there. And if that happens, I think we'll have a real renaissance of humanism in Australia. I hope anyway, that's my plan.
Probably many of us here are involved in more than one set of circles of interests, and if each one of us spread the word to our other circles, and then those people spread the word to their other circles, I think that's where we'll find some real growth. On that, getting out the message that what you feel is humanism. I saw Alison's hand go up, and then I saw Rod's hand go up. I just want to finish this thought. I'll just put your names in the channel so I don't forget. Alison and then Rod. Oh, and I see Jim as well. On that getting out the message, yesterday I gave a presentation on what is humanism, which goes to all of those kinds of the social issues and the existential questions that make us humanists. And that was recorded, so that'll be available in our YouTube channel soon. And there is a link now on our website to the slide deck that I spoke from, which has extensive speakers notes with it as well. So let's go on to the people who had their hands up. Alison first.
Thank you. Alistair reminded me of how I found out I was a humanist. I thought I'd just share my story. So I was already a secular activist in relation to Queensland Parents for Secular State Schools, but I hadn't actually, that started in 2014. I'd never heard the term humanism. But I came across, it was on Facebook, I don't know who shared it, but it was a quiz to find out if you were a humanist. I thought, what the hell is a humanist? So, well, let's do the quiz. And it came up, you are 100% humanist. And I went, well, okay, I better go find some other ones. So that's when I actually signed up. I found and signed up as a member of Humanist Society of Queensland. So that was just a random. I mean, I would have stumbled on it at some point, but that was that thing of well, what's that all about? And I realised I was in fact a 100% humanist.
We're actually working on a quiz as we speak.
Oh, good.
2.0.
For me, yeah, good idea.
Yep, we're planning a kind of personality style quiz where you answer the questions and it'll come up with either you're not yet a humanist, but we may be able to work together if you're interested in specific issues, or you might be a humanist, find out more and meet us at our meetup group, subscribe to our mailing list, or you're definitely a humanist, come and join us.
Like me.
Yeah. Rod, your hand was up next.
Yeah, just a quick one, and I realise now I can do it by looking at the video later, but I wanted Alistair's little speech to be written out so I can use it. That's a brilliant approach to telling people why they should be getting involved. I always worry about going along to other groups that I might be part of and talking about how, you know, I'm a humanist and they should be a humanist too. It reminds me too much of when I used to go and say, I'm a Christian and you should be a Christian too. I'm not sure that it goes down well in Australian groups, but the little talk that Alistair gave then as something that could be said to people, I thought was brilliant. So thanks for that.
Jim, your hand was up next.
Yeah, I want to approach it from a personal perspective initially. I'm doing 3 times as much activism as most people and probably 10 times as much as someone of my age. So humanism doesn't fit easily into that at the moment. I mean, climate change stuff and also Indigenous issues to some point. But I put little things in the Victorian Humanist newsletter. You know, that's my little contribution. Ideally, I'd like it to be much more. But what I'm wondering is when the new organisation is consolidated, 6 months' time, maybe a year's time, whether there's value in, rather than seeing it, you know, like you described, Marianne, say the group of people on this call take the message of humanism, pass it on to their friends, etc., that there's actually a more approach that involves more leadership, cooperative leadership, if you like, that the organisation agrees in a deliberative way on what the priorities are for this year or the next year or whatever, and it might be 2, it might be poverty, might be a traditional humanist issue, it might be Indigenous stuff, it might be climate change, whatever, you know, maybe a couple of those things. And then there's coordinated effort around those areas. What does it really mean for humanists to be involved in this space? What is humanism adding value? In what ways is humanism adding value to that? How can humanists help people? Take the poverty issue, for example. How can humanists connect with the different organisations that are working on poverty and single women, for example, older people who get left behind? There's a whole lot of areas there, for example. So I'll just throw that in as, yeah, it's a quandary I've got about being a humanist, but then also being an activist in these other areas as well.
That fits in really quite well with the Human Union project that we really kick-started this year in response to the pandemic. The Human Union project campaigns on 5 main themes, which were social issues identified by Lyndon Story when he was president of the Council of Humanist Societies. He selected 5 themes where he felt that humanism really had an important role to play in addressing those particular issues. The environment is one of them. Economic injustice is another. But that was very much a Lyndon-driven thing, and we do need to find ways to get more voices involved in the campaigns that are run on that platform, or set up additional platforms. We could very easily take a copy of that campaigning website and modify it to work on other themes if we choose to. Jeff, you had your hand up.
Oh, yes, thanks, Marianne. Yeah, look, I agree with everything everyone said, and even going back to Alistair's comments, I think there's a couple of things that strike me. One is that humanism needs to be seen to be relevant to people on a personal level. And I'm thinking, for example, again, with my background and LGBT people, I think I said earlier that there is a very big influence, religious influence in the LGBT community, even when we're looking at issues like gay conversion therapy. The gay press will often go and ask gay Christians for their views or things like that. They will not ask gay Muslims, gay Jews, or let alone gay atheists. And it strikes me we need to do something about that. For example, can humanists march in the Mardi Gras? Can humanists march in the Melbourne Pride March, or go to Midsummer Carnival or things like that, and be there, be physically present? And like this came out of what Alistair was saying. I thought, well, maybe we could do the same thing going to universities during orientation week, running stalls, running events, programs. What does humanism mean to you? Are you a humanist or whatever? And I think in the LGBT community, there's that same thing. But also following on from what Jim said, I think people often respond best maybe to when they see there's actually something happening. It's not just people giving a talk about what does humanism mean, but if someone can actually get up and say, this is what humanists are doing on this issue. We are involved with climate change issues, or we are involved with whatever. It's not just that we agree with the principle, but we're actually out there at the forefront doing something. And I think that to me, that's probably pretty much the same thing in a way, because if you're being involved, then you are out there at pride marches or at orientation groups or orientation weeks. And to me, that would probably help get the humanist message out there and would get people involved. I know I became involved as a humanist many years ago. I grew up as a bit of a science fiction nerd, and I became aware that the guy who created Star Trek was a humanist. And one day online, I was thinking, well, what is this humanism stuff anyway? And I Googled it and read, I think, the Amsterdam Declaration, and I thought, oh, that's me. So I think the more we can get the messages out there, producing pamphlets, producing, being involved in social justice issues, whatever it is, I think if we can do all those things, then that's getting our message out there. But it's also, like Jim said, it's sort of actually putting our money or our feet where our mouths are as well. And I think that's important.
I see Les's hand next, but I'll just read out a comment by Alison apropos to this conversation. I've recently changed my Facebook profile pic to a wheel of the 10 commitments for humanists. It wasn't made by HA. So Facebook just did a status update without comment from me, and I got a great response from Facebook friends about it and got the humanist message out to many people in a simple way. Les had his hand up first. Oh, Alison's showing the picture of the 10 commitments. I haven't seen that before. I think we might need to take that on board and make it part of our resources. Les, your hand has been up for a while.
Yeah, when appropriate, I wanted to take a step back to say something about the need for community, specifically for people who have left their religion. So when appropriate, I don't want to hijack the conversation now. So if we can put a place marker there for that.
Alison, did you want to say anything about those 10 commitments?
Only that it was just a simple thing. I didn't have to say, hey, I'm a humanist. Who wants to know about humanism? It just sort of did it for itself. A humanist friend actually updated her status, and so I did it too. But it'd be great to just do a HA version.
Yeah.
And I would update it again. But it's just, yeah, I got lots of likes. I got people commenting saying that's really great, and so it was just a simple way to get a conversation started.
That sounds like a job for Alistair, our designer, to come up with a Facebook-friendly status image that really represents Humanists Australia.
I mean, I think, the pen is mightier than the sword, and the algorithm is far mightier than the pen. So we can do that. That sounds great.
Stella's hand, and I see Clive's hand, but perhaps now is that pause in the conversation that Les was looking for. Oh, unless Stella and Clive, yours were directly related to the Facebook status.
I was only just going to back up. I think I come from a background, I've got 3 kids, busy life, and my connection with humanism is running on from what the others were saying, is, campaign-based and seeing action and things like that. So I think the campaigns are really important, and they just self-explanatory. People align themselves, whether it's, voluntary assisted dying, a person's right to have those laws, And there's a whole range of campaigns that, you know, about getting supernatural superstition out of it, you know, out of our policies, and, you know, and even prayer out of council, those types of things. So that's where I come from. I come from a very much needing to see action, and I don't know whether that's another way to attract people. Yeah, so it's just a comment, really.
Clive, did you have a quick comment, or shall we go over to Les?
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. It's all been said, so I'll leave it to Les now. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to backtrack for a moment back to our talk about the importance of community. And I wanted to say that for people who have left their religion, this is an especially acute problem for them. It's finding a new community, a brand new community, because they have been shunned, they've been excommunicated, they're literally been thrown out or having to leave. And that means leaving their friends and their family who stay within the religion. So those social connections. There's also, they've lost their capacity, financial capacity, because in many sects, they're discouraged from getting an education. And so there's a financial connection, the social connection. So they're, and the psychological aspect, of course, as well, because some of them, many of them are psychologically damaged. So they need not just community, but that peer support as well. And this is something we are seeing, this need we are seeing at an ever increasing amount as people leave their religion, as we've seen in the stats in the last few years. So this is a prime opportunity for doing something good, providing support for these people and introducing them. Well, that's the other great need they have. They've lost or in the process of losing their worldview that makes sense to them, that God orders things and answers prayer. And they're losing that. So they're needing a new worldview to make sense of their everyday lives. And that's another thing that humanism can provide them as well. So this is a ripe opportunity for introducing people who are desperately in need of new community and new supports.
And one of Humanist Australia's 4 main mission goals is to support people who've been persecuted because of their humanist beliefs, and that will include everyone in your network, Les. So it's a very important, it's that overlap of the community goal and the support goal. It's an important area for us. And of course, we've got other overlaps. We've got another one of our main goals is activism, and we've definitely got an overlap of communities and activism as well.
Ticks all the boxes, or some of the boxes.
Sue, your hand's up.
Yes, thanks, Marianne. I think it's really interesting that whole sense of community and what humanism. I mean, I'm one of those people who, a bit like Alison, perhaps has been a humanist all my life without actually really knowing it until relatively recently that it had a name. There was a framework. I think for me, a lot of the aspect, and picking up what Stella was saying as well, I think for me, my involvement or my contribution is probably more not so much being involved in initiating the activism, but as someone who might be able to provide support in other ways. For example, I suppose with Humanists Victoria, I've been sort of involved in doing some of the administrative tasks around that and supporting those sorts of things and helping move into perhaps more, helping with people getting familiar with Zoom, for example. I mean, it's that kind of role. I think so I think there are ways that different people will be able to contribute to communities in very different ways. Some will be sort of out there bearing the banners at the front of the marches, and other people will be sort of organising the booking lists and the and the applications for marches and those sorts of things. So to have that range of skills, to be gathering groups into the communities who have that different ranges of skills, some who can take the sort of leadership of or champion the initiative, if you like. I think sometimes I think sometimes the word leader gets misused, because often someone who calls themselves a leader, where the group calls them a leader, they're supposed to therefore do everything. Whereas I think being the champion is something else. It's about inspiring others to be a part of it and to contribute whatever particular skills that they have to contribute, whether it's out there and vocal, or whether it's more quietly sort of helping to run things in the background, and to be valuing all that range, I think, in any initiative that happens. So that's just, that was just what I wanted to contribute.
In the leadership positions, you do get a lot of people saying, well, you should do X, Y, Z. And there's two ways of reacting to that. One is to say, don't tell me what to do, you do it yourself. Or another way you can react to that is to say, yes, that's a wonderful idea. We do need to do that. How can I support you in doing it?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions for our panelists? It's gone quiet. Clive.
You're on mute, Clive.
There we go. Yeah, years ago, just sort of thoughts running through my mind. Years ago, I think I was guilty of proselytizing for humanism. And I remember on more than one occasion, people thought I belonged to some strange new cult, perhaps something like Scientology or something. So I backed right off from that. I'm not very skilled at selling a product. So these days I just, for instance, I belong to another group called Dying with Dignity, and I was at a meeting the other day and I simply said, from a humanistic point of view, I think blah, blah, blah. So I just dropped a word here and there. That's what I do these days. I think you've got to be a bit careful plugging humanism to people who don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
That's all I need to say, yeah.
So we do have to help them understand what it is, which goes to another one of the four main goals of Humanists Australia, the education goal.
Yeah.
Well, and the first line of our mission, which is that we envisage an Australia where every Australian knows what humanism means and has the choice of joining if they wish to into something.
I think that's the critical thing, is that statement is not actually prescriptive. It's saying that it's really important to us that everyone knows what humanism is, so they know that they could become a humanist, if they liked.
Yeah.
But it's not saying that they ought to be or that they must be.
Yeah.
And I think proselytizing, that's where the line of coercion comes in. And that's where the danger lies, in trying to conform people to meet your view of what their behavior and their morals should be, which I think, humanists don't want to do. On the other hand, I think other ways of seeing the world do proselytize aggressively. In fact, in some cases, their entire infrastructure is set up to, do that. That's the system. That's exactly how it works.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the challenge, is coming up with non-coercive ways of communicating to large numbers of people what humanism is, why they ought to think about it, why they ought to learn more. That's going to be, I think, the defining challenge of the next 2 years of our organisation.
Yep.
I think the T-shirts can help the conversation.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It might be it. That might be our only thing. Then we'll be set.
Sue.
Yes, I was just going to reinforce what Alistair was saying about the fact that there can be a fine line. I think it's important to be enthusiastic. That it's to share your own passion for this particular way of seeing the world and how it's serving you in life, etc. But to be doing so in a way that isn't negating anyone else's worldviews at the same time, so to speak. So, it's not about preaching. It is about passion, but it's not about preaching. Does that make sense? So I think it's I think for me that's a part of it. And what we were saying, I think in one of the other earlier conversations today about the importance of language. I think Les raised it at one point too in a previous conversation, that the words we use, the language we use is also really important in terms of how we talk about what we're doing and what humanism means, etc. So thanks, Alistair.
Just going back to the intersections of communities, I sing with the Canberra Choir, which used to be the Canberra Gay and Lesbian Choir. It's an LGBTIQ plus choir. And I do talk to them about humanism from time to time in the social circles. But Jeff, I was thinking I should point out to them that we've got the Rainbow Atheists. We might get some more members coming through to the Rainbow Atheists community from Canberra. If I do that, there's quite a few of people in my choir community who have been traumatized by religion, and so they might come through to Les's group as well. Les, have you got your hand up again?
Yes, I do. The question of coercion is an interesting one, and I'm thinking that humanists and humanist societies don't really have the power or the capacity to coerce anyone to believe or to join, because we don't have we don't threaten people with hell, for example, which is a coercive technique. We don't have that. So none of the marketing materials and communications I've seen to date from all of the humanist, rationalist, secularist organisations I've ever considered as being coercive or manipulative. Now, once we get them into the organisation, this is where we can coerce people to stay. And this is what the sects do. They have a number of techniques. One is financial and social dependency. If you get out of here, you get no finances and you lose your family and your friends. The other one, of course, is the manipulation of information. So it's a closed learning group. You can only learn and get information from people who are already in there. So that's another method of coercion and brainwashing. We of course, by our very nature, don't do any of that.
Good. I hope you'd get there. I thought you were going to end with, well, maybe we should try.
Well, now that you say that, Alistair. Well, and Marianne was saying something before about we could learn something from the Scientologists, maybe.
Well, we do need to be very, very careful of not crossing that line into manipulation or coercion. We need to be giving people the support they need and the encouragement they need, and giving them love and helping them find their place with Humanists Australia as their home, the place where they feel comfortable and wanted and where they want to contribute. So we're at time. Oh, Dirk, I saw your hand there.
Yep. Thanks for that. The Scientology is a major problem. I came across it in Adelaide many years ago and just said I had an interesting experience, and I had some background in hypnosis, and I said that they were using hypnotic method among other things, and my parents went along and they got a bit hooked, which was very, I got very angry about that. So I like the way the discussion has been going in this field. That one of the things that I wanted to mention a bit earlier was that one of the differences in attitude in the philosophical space is that in my German background, it means that one tends to have a Weltanschauung, a philosophy of life that's comprehensive and all-encompassing. And it's less in the Anglo-Saxon context, it's much, much less the case. And the thing that I like about humanism, and hence I started the Humanist Society as the founding secretary in 1962 in South Australia, was its more comprehensive and overarching approach. And I think one of the things that we need to emphasize is the number of other organizations that we have started, including Dying with Dignity and its other earlier names, including some civil liberties organizations, and. I just needed to sort of emphasize that. Thanks.
Jeff, are you waving goodbye, or have you got your hand up to say something?
Yeah. Can I add to what has just been said?
Yes.
I've got literally in front of me a copy of something that one of our members here in Victoria, Helena Stranard, wrote back in 1999, addressing exactly that point. She points out that since in the 20 years that she had been involved up to that point, humanists had been involved in birth control, voluntary euthanasia, environmental protection, secular education, abolition of capital punishment, divorce law reform, abolition law reform, equality of the sexes, right to privacy and freedom of expression, adoption of children not based on religion, gay law reform, decriminalisation of prostitution, abolition of racial discrimination, and abolition of political imprisonment. And that she also pointed out there were various groups that also have arisen that humanists were involved in seeding or encouraging at the start. And I know from my own experience that includes gay liberation type groups as well. So.
All right, well, we are at time, so
I just just on what Jeff was saying, I wonder whether it's useful to have some sort of historical page on the Facebook group, on the website, saying here's what humanism, humanism has been around for hundreds of years. Some sort of historical, I don't know how you'd write it up, but illustrating all the things in the past and what it stands for and that type of thing.
If anyone can draft the text for that page, I'm sure Alistair or I could add it to our website pretty quickly.
In fact, from memory, the Victorian Humanists website does have a component both on the history of the Victorian organisation, but also generally the history of the humanist movement in Australia and the world. And Humanist International has something similar. So I think that's a really good idea because the truth is that it runs deep with people, humanism. And when people apply their humanist value to their whole life, as Jim says, to their activism as well, it can have magnitudinous consequences. And I think we should really reflect on the scale of impact that we already had and therefore what we could do in the future as well. But yeah, so let's put it in. I'll write that down.
Liz.
Yeah, just quickly on the history, there's two history components on the Humanist Victoria website. One is the official history from 1961 up until 2011 or something. And that's got a lot of the organisational stuff in it. So it's not very activity about activism. The other part that is part of the refurbishment of the website over the last couple of years is the project section of the website. And that's where I accumulated on one project page everything we've done about secular education, for example. And then there's another page about everything we've done with something else. And I think we have a number of projects. And on that one page, this was the part of the work, collecting on that one page everything about the history of that particular project or that particular activity. And that's in the project section of the website. So there's a lot of history there.
Thank you, Liz. Clive, I think you wanted to say something? All right, it's time to wrap up this session. Thank you very much to all of our panelists and to everyone who came and asked such interesting and stimulating questions today. So this evening we have our community dinners. If you can't make it to one in Canberra, Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne or Adelaide, there is one online hosted by Sue James. So do pop along to that if you can. Tomorrow is Activism Day. In the morning at 10 a.m. we have Lyndon Story talking to us about the Human Union Project. And at 2 p.m. we have Dr. Anna Greta Hunter, who is the chair of the Commission for the Human Future, talking to us about activism and the human future. All right, thanks again, everyone, and I hope to see you at one of the 3 remaining sessions.